Welcome to Heidi Relationships. Today, we'll read some more stories from Reddit. But before we start, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. That would help the channel a lot. Thank you very much in advance. The first one is titled, "My husband gave our baby a different name behind my back. I changed it legally." Let me start by saying that becoming a mother is supposed to be one of the most beautiful experiences in a woman's life. What's not beautiful is discovering that your husband betrayed your trust in one of the most fundamental ways possible by going behind your back to change our daughter's agreed-upon name on her birth certificate. I'm Josie, 29, and my husband Walker, 32, and I had been married for 3 years when I got pregnant with our first child. We were both excited about becoming parents and spent months preparing for our baby's arrival. One of the things we discussed extensively was our daughter's name. You see, I always knew I wanted to be a mother. Even before Walker and I got married, we talked about having children and building a family together. I dreamed about reading bedtime stories, teaching first steps, and creating the kind of loving home I had growing up with my grandmother. When we finally saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, I was over the moon. Walker and I had been trying for about 6 months, and seeing that positive result felt like all our dreams were coming true. I still remember Walker's face when I told him. He just lit up with this pure joy that made me fall in love with him all over again. "We're going to be parents," he kept saying, spinning me around in our kitchen. I can't believe it. The first trimester was rough with morning sickness. Whoever called it morning sickness was a liar. It lasted all day. But Walker was incredibly supportive. He'd make me ginger tea, rub my back, and never complained when I sent him out at midnight for specific cravings. We turned our spare room into a nursery together, painting the walls a soft yellow and assembling furniture on weekends. Walker would talk to my belly every night, telling our baby about his day and how excited he was to meet them. Everything felt perfect. When we found out we were having a girl, I cried happy tears. I immediately thought of my grandmother Elizabeth and all the wisdom she'd shared with me over the years, how she taught me to bake cookies, helped me with my homework, and showed me what unconditional love really meant while my mom worked long hours to support us. I wanted to name her after my grandmother, Elizabeth Rose. She was an amazing woman who practically raised me while my single mom worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Walker initially seemed on board with this choice. He even told me it was a beautiful way to honor my grandmother's memory. "Elizabeth Rose is perfect," he'd said when I first suggested it. "It's classic but not outdated, and the meaning behind it makes it even more special." We had the name discussion settled by my second trimester, or so I thought. Looking back, I should have noticed something was off when Walker's mother, June, started making comments about the name during her visits. "Elizabeth?" she'd say, wrinkling her nose. "That's such an old lady name. Wouldn't you prefer something more modern?" I'd laugh it off, explaining the significance of the name, but June would just purse her lips and change the subject. What I didn't know then was that she was having very different conversations with Walker when I wasn't around. Our daughter was born after 18 hours of labor. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 6 ounces of pure joy. Walker was there throughout the delivery, holding my hand and being incredibly supportive. When they placed her on my chest, I whispered, "Welcome to the world, Elizabeth Rose." The first few days in the hospital were a blur of visitors, nursing attempts, and trying to get what little sleep I could. Walker handled most of the paperwork while I recovered, which I was grateful for at the time. Little did I know what he was actually doing. We brought Elizabeth home, and everything seemed perfect. That is, until the Social Security card arrived in the mail 3 weeks later. I was alone when I opened the envelope, expecting to see Elizabeth Rose printed on the card. Instead, I found myself staring at Victoria June. I thought there must have been some mistake. I called Walker immediately. "Hey, honey, there's something wrong with the baby's Social Security card," I said when he answered. "They've got her name completely wrong." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Too long. "Walker?" "I've been meaning to talk to you about that," he finally said, his voice careful. "Mom and I thought Victoria June would be a better choice, more modern, and it honors my side of the family. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut." "You what?" "Look, I know you wanted to name her after your grandmother, but Mom made some good points about how Elizabeth is really outdated and Victoria is such a beautiful name." "You changed our daughter's name without telling me?" My voice was shaking. "While I was recovering from giving birth? You were exhausted, and I didn't want to stress you out. I thought once you got used to it." I hung up on him. Then I went to our home office and started going through the copies of paperwork we'd received from the hospital. Sure enough, the birth certificate listed her as Victoria June. Walker had filled out the forms himself, completely disregarding our agreement. When Walker got home that evening, I was waiting for him with the paperwork spread out on the kitchen table. "Explain," I said as soon as he walked in. "Josie, please try to understand." "Understand what? That you and your mother decided your opinion matters more than mine? That you went behind my back while I was recovering from bringing your child into the world?" Mom thought. "Stop right there," I held up my hand. "If the next words out of your mouth start with mom thought, we're going to have a much bigger problem than we already do." He ran his hands through his hair, his classic stress gesture. "I just thought Victoria June would be better. Elizabeth is so old-fashioned." "That wasn't your decision to make alone." I was trying not to raise my voice because the baby was sleeping. "We agreed on Elizabeth Rose. We discussed it for months. You never once mentioned wanting to change it. Because you were so set on naming her after your grandmother. You wouldn't even consider other options." "That's not true, and you know it. We discussed dozens of names. You agreed to Elizabeth Rose. You said it was perfect." "I changed my mind." "Then you should have talked to me about it, not gone behind my back and let me call our daughter Elizabeth for 3 weeks, while knowing that wasn't even her legal name." The baby started crying then, probably sensing the tension. I went to get her, leaving Walker standing in the kitchen. When I came back with a now calm Elizabeth, because that was her name regardless of what any paperwork said, Walker was sitting at the table looking defeated. "I messed up," he said quietly. "Yes, you did. The question is, what are you going to do to fix it?" "Mom says—" "I don't care what your mother says," I snapped, then immediately lowered my voice when the baby stirred. "This is about us and our daughter. Your mother doesn't get a vote." The next few days were tense. Walker slept in the guest room while I researched what it would take to legally change our daughter's name. I discovered that in our state, both parents normally need to agree to change a baby's name, but there are exceptions when one parent has acted in bad faith, like, say, filling out official documents fraudulently. I consulted with a family law attorney who confirmed that I had a strong case for changing the name without Walker's cooperation, given the circumstances. When I told Walker I was going ahead with the legal name change, he finally cracked. "Please don't do this," he begged. "Mom will be so upset." "Your mother's feelings are not my concern," I replied coldly. "You both betrayed my trust when I was at my most vulnerable. Did either of you even think about how I would feel?" "I thought you'd understand once you saw how pretty Victoria June looks written out." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you listening to yourself? You thought I'd just get over you completely disregarding my wishes about our daughter's name because it looks pretty written out?" That's when his mother decided to get involved directly. She showed up at our house unannounced one afternoon while Walker was at work. "Josie, dear, we need to talk about this name situation," she said, breezing past me into the house without waiting for an invitation. "There is no situation, June. Your son and you conspired to change my daughter's name without my knowledge or consent. I'm fixing that." "Don't you think you're being a bit dramatic? Victoria June is such a lovely name, and it keeps the family connection going." "You mean it strokes your ego?" I cut in. "Elizabeth was named after the woman who raised me, who loved me unconditionally and taught me everything I know about being a good person. What's your claim to having her named after you?" "I'm her grandmother." "Yes, and you're proving to be a pretty terrible one by teaching her that it's okay to lie and go behind people's backs as long as you get what you want." June's face turned red. "Now see here, young lady." "No, you see here," I interrupted. "I have already filed the paperwork to legally change her name back to Elizabeth Rose. You and Walker can either accept that, or you can explain to a judge why you think it's okay to fraudulently fill out birth documents." She left in a huff, no doubt heading straight to tell Walker how unreasonable I was being. Sure enough, my phone started blowing up with messages from his side of the family about how I was tearing the family apart over just a name. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on the legal process and taking care of my daughter. Walker continued to sleep in the guest room, alternating between trying to convince me to drop it and giving me the silent treatment. The turning point came when my mom finally found out what was going on. I'd been hesitant to tell her because I knew how hurt she'd be. Elizabeth had been her mother after all. "He did what?" she exclaimed when I finally broke down and told her everything. "Changed her name to Victoria June behind my back," I repeated, crying into the phone. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I'm going ahead with the legal name change, but Walker thinks I'm being unreasonable and his whole family is against me." "Oh, honey," she said softly. You're not being unreasonable at all. This isn't just about the name, it's about trust and respect. If he's willing to do this, what else might he do behind your back? She was right, of course. This wasn't just about the name anymore. It was about Walker showing that he valued his mother's opinion over mine, that he was willing to deceive me, and that he thought it was okay to make major decisions about our child without consulting me. The next day, my mom showed up with two things: a folder full of photos and letters from my grandmother, and the business card of a marriage counselor. The photos are to remind you why you're fighting this fight, she said. And the card is because if your marriage is going to survive this, you and Walker need professional help. I left the counselor's card on Walker's pillow in the guest room. That evening, he finally came to talk to me without bringing up his mother's opinion. I found the counselor's card, he said, hovering in the doorway of our bedroom. And I made an appointment for us, for Thursday. It was a start. The first counseling session was rough. Walker tried to minimize what he'd done, saying he just thought Victoria June sounded better. The counselor, however, wasn't having it. Walker, she said gently, what message do you think you sent to your wife by changing your daughter's name without consulting her? He shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make everyone happy. By everyone, you mean your mother? That hit home. Walker spent the next few sessions working through his issues with standing up to his mother and understanding why his actions had damaged his marriage so fundamentally. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. Despite pressure from his family, Walker finally agreed not to contest the name change. Elizabeth Rose officially became our daughter's legal name again when she was 2 months old. June was furious, of course. She showed up at our house again, this time with Walker's father in tow. This is ridiculous, she fumed. Victoria June is a family name. No, I corrected her, it's your name, and you don't get to stamp it on my daughter just because you convinced your son to go behind my back. Walker, his father finally spoke up, are you really going to let her do this? Walker looked between his parents and me, holding our daughter. For the first time, he stood his ground. Yes, Dad, I am. Because Josie's right, what I did was wrong. Elizabeth Rose is our daughter's name, the name we chose together, and it should have stayed that way. June burst into tears and stormed out. His father followed after giving us both disappointed looks, but Walker stayed firm. That was 6 months ago. Things aren't perfect. We're still working through trust issues and counseling, and June still refuses to call Elizabeth by her real name. She just says the baby when she has to refer to her. But Walker and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. Last week, we were looking through the photo album my mom brought over, showing Elizabeth pictures of her namesake. She was beautiful, Walker said softly, looking at a photo of my grandmother on her wedding day. Inside and out, from everything you've told me about her. She was, I agreed. She would have loved being a great-grandmother. I'm so sorry, he said, not for the first time. I should have honored your wishes about Elizabeth's name. I should have stood up to my mother. Yes, you should have, I replied, but you're learning to do that now, and that's what matters. We're taking things day by day. Walker has started setting better boundaries with his mother, though it's still a work in progress. He's learning to be a partner first and a son second, which is exactly what our marriage needs. Yesterday, we received Elizabeth's updated passport in the mail. Seeing Elizabeth Rose printed officially made me cry, happy tears this time. Walker hugged me and promised again that he would never betray my trust like that again. I believe him, mostly, but I also keep copies of all Elizabeth's legal documents in a secure place just in case. Trust, once broken, takes a long time to fully rebuild. To those wondering if I was too harsh about insisting on changing her name back legally, remember that this wasn't just about the name. This was about respect, trust, and standing up for what's right. A marriage should be a partnership, not a dictatorship run by your mother-in-law. Elizabeth is thriving, by the way. At 8 months old, she's crawling everywhere and babbling constantly. She has my grandmother's eyes and smile, which makes her name even more perfect. As for June, she's learning that being a grandmother is a privilege, not a right. If she wants to be part of Elizabeth's life, she needs to respect our decisions as parents, including our daughter's name. Walker and I still have work to do on our marriage, but we're getting there. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show you where the weak spots are in your relationship. The important thing is what you do after. Do you work to fix them, or do you let them break you apart? We chose to fix them. It's not easy, but Elizabeth Rose deserves parents who can work through their problems and come out stronger. And every time I look at her, I'm reminded that some things are worth fighting for, including the right to name your child after someone who meant the world to you. Update. Wow, I didn't expect this post to get so much attention. Since many people asked for an update, here's where things stand now. Elizabeth just turned 1, and we had her birthday party last weekend. June actually came and, miracle of miracles, called her Elizabeth for the first time. It wasn't exactly sincere, more resigned acceptance, but it's progress. Walker has continued with both individual and couples counseling. He's getting much better at standing up to his mother, though we still have occasional hiccups. Last month, June tried to pressure us into getting Elizabeth's ears pierced, another family tradition, and Walker shut that down immediately without any prompting from me. We're expecting our second child now, a boy this time. Walker and I are choosing his name together, with no input from either of our mothers. We've agreed that all future paperwork will be filled out together, no exceptions. Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the best changes. Our marriage is actually stronger now than it was before this happened, because we've learned how to communicate better and set proper boundaries. And Elizabeth? She's perfect. Every time someone asks about her name and I tell them she's named after my grandmother, I'm reminded that standing up for what's right is always worth it, even when it's hard, even when it causes conflict. As my grandmother used to say, the truth might hurt for a little while, but a lie hurts forever. I'm glad I fought this battle, not just for Elizabeth's name, but for the principle of trust and respect in marriage. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go stop my daughter from eating my phone case. Again. Here are my thoughts about the story. I'm actually shaking reading this story. Like, imagine being in the hospital, literally recovering from pushing a whole human being out of your body, and your husband is sneaking around changing the baby's name to please his mommy? The audacity, the betrayal. Why would anyone at all think that would work out? The part that really sent me into orbit was how they let her call the baby Elizabeth for 3 whole weeks before she found out. Like, what was their plan here? Just hope she never sees any official documents? Wait until the kid starts school and be like, surprise, she's actually Victoria June. Give me a break. And can we talk about June for a minute? This woman really thought she had the right to override a name chosen to honor someone who actually raised the OP? The nerve, the entitlement, walking into someone's house uninvited to lecture them about their own baby's name? Ma'am, this isn't the 1950s, and you're not the one with the final say with their daughter. Their daughter, June, not yours. But what really gets me is Walker. Walker. My guy really thought he could just commit literal fraud on legal documents and it would all work out because Victoria June looks pretty written out. Sir, this is not a Facebook profile where you can just change names willy-nilly. These are government documents. And the fact that he kept trying to use, but mom says, as a defense? Are you married to your mother or your wife, dude? The most infuriating part was how his whole family ganged up on OP like she was the unreasonable one. Tearing the family apart over just a name? No, guys, let me spell it out for you. Walker and June tore the family apart when they decided to go behind a postpartum mother's back and change her baby's name without her consent. Though I gotta say, the karma was perfect when OP just went ahead and legally changed it back. The fact that she had such a strong legal case because Walker literally committed fraud, that's what we call consequences meeting actions. And June still refusing to call the baby Elizabeth and just saying the baby? Girl, that's not the power move you think it is. That's just showing everyone how petty and immature you are. Like, congratulations, you're acting less mature than the actual baby. But you know what gives me hope? The fact that Walker actually went to therapy and learned from this. The bar is in hell, but at least he picked it up and did some squats with it. When he finally stood up to his parents about the ear piercing thing. Growth, people. Growth? I'm just sitting here thinking about how different this story would be if Walker had just, talked to his wife about wanting a different name. Like, communication is free. But no, he had to go full sneaky snake, and now he's got trust issues in his marriage that he has to fix. And hey, at least little Elizabeth got a good story out of it. Imagine her telling this tale when she's older. Yeah, my dad tried to name me after Grandma's ego, but Mom wasn't having it. Now that's going to be an interesting conversation at future family dinners. But seriously, if your partner ever pulls something like this, remember OP's strength, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand firm and say absolutely not to toxic behavior, even when it comes from family, especially when it comes from family. But anyways, guys, with this, we've reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and like the video/comment if you enjoyed it. I'll see you again tomorrow.